Hello my friends, it's Ranger Russ from the Meigs Nature Center. I am not coming to you from the forest today. I'm in our old building getting ready to do a really special program. But before we get into that, let's remind everybody this coming Saturday we have another one of our lecture series, a guest lecture series. It's going to be absolutely amazing. You're going to find out about deer and their relationship with ticks. That's 10 o'clock on Saturday. Make sure that you look at meigspointnaturecenter.org, go to the calendar, and every Saturday at 10 o'clock we've got lectures through March. I think we've got one left to book at the end of March, but we're just going to continue to go. And you can sign up for a Zoom link, or you can watch it on Facebook Live. So the Zoom link is a much better connection. It's more steady and you get a better picture. So that's why I encourage people to sign up for those Zoom links. Now, I will continue to do these programs on Tuesdays through Fridays at 11 o'clock. And I'm going to be introducing a new program coming up. We're going to start visiting with some of the staff that work for the DEEP. So we'll be doing interviews out at their locations, keeping our social distance, but we'll find out what it is that drew these people to work for the department, how long they've been with the department, what their job is, and maybe some fun stories from them. So look for those programs along with my wild animal focus programs and my park visits and the nature walks and the crafts and science experiments and all the other programs that we do. If you've missed any of the programs, you can see them on the Meigs Point Nature Center YouTube channel or under meigspointnaturecenter.org in the Virtual Learning Center. And if you visit the Virtual Learning Center, you're going to get some extra educational content, which you can use for your classrooms or homeschool groups if you are a teacher. All right, so let's begin with the name of our program. And today's program, I call it the Misfit Pet Parade. So if you remember the Island of Misfit Toys from one of the Santa Claus movies, I don't remember which one, but that's what led me to the name of this. These are misfit pets. These are pets that people took in and then realized that they were not able to keep them for one reason or another. Now, most of the pets that we're going to be looking at today, most of the animals, the people took good care of them, but they weren't able to keep them any longer. That is really the exception. Here at the Nature Center, over the years, I've taken in many, many animals that people just were not able to take care of. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So these programs are animals that have come into the Nature Center and for the most part are not native to Connecticut. All the ones that we're going to look at are not native, but we do take in animals that were pets that are native species. So those are different programs. And let's start out with the most common pet that we see here at the Nature Center, and it's the red-eared turtle. Now, these are now illegal to buy and sell in the state of Connecticut as pets, so pet stores should no longer be selling these. But red ears, they are the most common pet turtle in the United States. Thousands, tens of thousands of these are raised each day and sent to pet stores. Now, again, in Connecticut, they're not being sent to pet stores. Shedding a scale there. That's very cool. So, red-eared sliders, where are they native to? They're native to the deep south. So Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, a little bit into the panhandle of Florida, a little bit into Texas. That's where they're naturally found. They are invasive on the West Coast. The entire West Coast is now has these. There are points in Asia that these are now an invasive species, places in Europe, all over the world. I think there may be one place in Africa where they're listed as an invasive. And it's really because they're produced in the US and shipped around the world. Now, we don't ship as many to China any longer. China now breeds them on their own. But when they were being bred and sent to China, it was something like 30,000 a day were hatched out in the US to be sent off for pets. So another thing that's changed over the years is the description of these turtles. So if you're going to choose a pet, you need to think about some things. The thing that people usually think about is, what do they eat and what do I have to do to take care of them to keep them alive? That's only scratching the surface. You know, these turtles, they eat mostly turtle sticks. Really easy to buy those at pet stores. They could eat vegetables. They'll eat other fish and some shrimp and things like that. So they have a variety of things that you can feed them. Not very hard to find food for them. You keep them in a tank with water as long as they have a place to climb out and bask. That's pretty simple as well. But what people don't think about is what the turtle does in the water. These turtles poop. Everything poops, right? I love that book. So they get the water pretty dirty pretty quickly, especially if you feed them in their tank. So their water ends up being green and brown. I've seen some really, you couldn't even see the turtle any longer. And that only takes a couple of days for the water to get that dirty. So you really need to think about that, is keeping that water clean. You need a massive filtration system for a turtle this large. You can see he's opening his eyes. His name, by the way, is Deadpool. So we thought it was a cool name because Deadpool's all red and this is a red-haired turtle. I don't know. And again, we don't usually give the names of our turtles that are native species, but this is a pet, so we'll use its name in a program. And Deadpool's showing you, I'm a scary turtle. Let's see if I can get to focus there. Look at that. You can look right down his throat. All right, actually, let's see if it's a boy or a girl. And this looks like Deadpool is a boy. The boys have thicker tails. The girls' tails are longer and skinnier. The boys' tails are. Also with these, the females get larger and are usually a bit more colorful. You know what determines sex in a red-eared turtle? Temperature. It's pretty cool. If it's above 29.5 degrees, they're going to be girls. If it's below 29.5, they're going to be boys. So I always thought that was cool. Crocodiles and alligators, by the way, are the opposite. The boys are the cooler temperatures and the girls are the warmer temperatures. So, all right. So back to what it takes to keep this turtle alive. Keeping the tank clean is going to be really important, but also the basking area. These turtles need to climb out and be able to completely dry themselves with a full spectrum UV light. UV kills algae and bacteria that will grow on their shells and can cause shell rot. They will get little holes that begin to eat away their shells. It is fatal for these turtles. If they don't get shell rot, if this turtle lives maximum years, they could live up to 40 years. Now, this is one of the things that's changed over the years. They used to say, when you would go to look at these at pet stores, they'd say, oh, they live about 20 years and they get about 6 to 8 inches long. Then I saw they increased it to about 12 inches long. So now they list them at 12 inches long. In actuality, I have seen these turtles up to 15 inches, sometimes a little bit bigger, and they live a good 40 years if they're properly cared for. So imagine how these turtles come to be pets. Most of the time it's for a child between 9 and 13 years old. Most common range to get a pet turtle. That child gets their turtle at 9 to 14 and they keep the turtle for 10 years or so and then they go off to college. And now the parent has a turtle that's only 10 years old. So the parent says, ooh, I have a turtle and I'm going to have to take care of it for 30 years. Think about that. 30 more years with the turtle while son and daughter go to college and then get a job and then, you know, they're away. And now here you have this turtle still. And Steve is asking a question. How do you tell the age of a turtle? So generally, if you look at the bottom of a turtle, you're going to see ridges in the scutes, the scales on the bottom. And this turtle, you can barely make out any ridges at all, and I can only see maybe 3 ridges. That doesn't mean this is a 3-year-old turtle. It means this turtle is over 30. So once they get to be around 30 years old, those ridges are worn away and you can't really see them anymore, so you can't really determine their age. So this turtle is at least 30 years old. Or it had a really rough life and it wore the scales away first. So now this is not a very large turtle for 30 years. That doesn't mean, the size, you can't determine the age of a turtle by its size. If this turtle is kept very warm and given all the food it can eat, it could be this size in 4 years. If it didn't get a lot of food and were kept in cooler temperatures, this turtle could be 30 years old. So, big difference there. All right, and someone says 40 years, that's a long time. It is a long time to have a pet. Now, I'm not going to be talking about birds today, or I don't have any birds to look at, but some species of birds live 80 or 100 years. And I had a volunteer at the Nature Center that made a really good statement. And that is, if you have to leave your pet in your will, you need to really think about who's going to take that turtle or that animal when you're gone. So please consider that when you are purchasing your turtle. Okay, let's move on and look at some of the other things that we have. Let's see. We're gonna go now to. Let's do another turtle. So, this is not a red-eared turtle, but red-eared turtles get this big. Now, if you look it up, generally this is how big they're going to say red-eared turtles get. I've seen red ears that are a good 3 or 4 inches longer than this one and 2 inches wider in the shell. So look at this turtle. It's about the size of my head. That is a large turtle. This turtle requires a large tank or aquarium. It requires a large basking area. They need to climb out and, again, dry themselves off. And this turtle was really great. It was up on its basking area when I grabbed it, so it's completely dry now. I like to see that in aquatic turtles. If they stay in the water all the time, again, they're going to get algae and bacteria. They're going to start eating holes in their shells. So this is, there's a few names for these, a yellow-eared slider or a yellow-eared cooter or a southern cooter, or again, common names. You can have lots of different names. These are not as common as an invasive species around the world, but that doesn't mean that they might or could become an invasive species. So these are not invasive in Connecticut at all. These are, again, a southern turtle. These are found in the Carolinas, down all the way to Florida, and then over to, I think it's all the way to the Mississippi. You'll have to look up a range map on this one. But all the same things you need to consider when you're thinking about this turtle as you do with that red-eared turtle. That water is going to need a large filtration system. You're going to need a big basking area. You're going to need to keep the water warm. These turtles don't like it. If the temperature drops too low, they stop eating. And if they stop eating long enough, they're not going to survive. Also, what occurs, if they stay cold and aren't eating, they can get pneumonia. I've had turtles with pneumonia. We've never had a turtle here at the Nature Center get pneumonia, but I've had turtles from other nature centers that we've taken in that had pneumonia. We have to give them antibiotic shots. We have to keep them more dry. They only get to go in the water once a day. Our turtles come out of the water once a day. They get to dry out for an hour each day. They get to run around the floor here. Some of them can't be around each other because some of them will get aggressive. Sometimes you get a male that chases the females all around. Another thing to consider, if you're buying multiple turtles, you may have to separate them because they may not get along all year. So, this turtle's name is Mikey. as one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All right, let's see. Someone says, Deadpool hooked me. I'll watch the whole show. My favorite animal. Very cool. All right, so again, the yellow-eared turtle, you really need to think about it. These turtles can live up to 40 years. When your son or daughter, if you're buying it for a child, you need to consider that when they go to college, most colleges do not allow pets, at least for freshman year. You can't have pets sometimes on campus until junior or senior year, and some of them you can't have at all. So you really need to consider whether that child is going to take care of the pet their whole lives, or if you want to take responsibility. And in general, I will say, if you're a parent out there and you are getting a pet, you need to think that it's going to be your responsibility to take care of that pet. And if you're not willing to make that commitment, you probably shouldn't get it. Because you shouldn't count on a child to take on that responsibility. Even though you think that you're teaching your child responsibility by getting them a pet and making them promise that they're going to be the one to take care of it, if you're not willing to make that commitment, then you shouldn't expect your child to make that commitment. So, just another thing to keep in mind when you're choosing a pet. Mikey is a pretty cool turtle. I just love this turtle. He hangs out with us just wandering around. This is a boy. When I hold him like this, now he is pushing, you can see he's pushing with his claws, and they can scratch you sometimes. Generally, he's not digging his claws in, he's just chilling out. But he loves to walk around the nature center, and he will walk right up to us sometimes just to see what we're up to. All right, let's move on. Let's take a look now at a snake. Now, over the years, I have taken in about 40 of these snakes. I take them in, find them other homes or better homes, and then they move on. Steve makes a good comment. That goes for dogs. I would say it goes for all pets. All of these things are considerations you should make with any pet that you're considering. But we're talking today about more exotic than cats and dogs. All right, so the thing that comes in more often, even more often than red-eared sliders, which I've probably taken in probably nearly 40 red ears as well, corn snakes. There was one point that I had 9 corn snakes here at the Nature Center, and almost every one of them, 7 of them, were because they were bought for a child that went to college and the parent had the snake. Now, this corn snake, this is Daisy. Daisy actually has a disorder. You can see the lumps going down the spine. This makes Daisy a very challenging snake because its food, the food has to be small enough to pass through these little bumps here. Now, this eventually will cause Daisy pain, and she will not be able to survive past that. But since we've gotten her, she seems pretty good. She's not in pain. She's eating really well. She's gotten a little bit heavier since we took her in, so that's always a good thing to see. So these snakes, you know, again, if you go to a pet store, they tell you one thing. If you look it up, do your own research. Don't rely on the person at the pet store to tell you how long they live or how big they get. Generally, they say in a pet store they don't live more than 8 years or so. Unfortunately, pet store snakes don't live much longer than that, but that's because of the way that they're raised. So these snakes are hatched out in these giant farms. Again, just like the red ears, tens of thousands a day hatch here in the United States and are shipped all across the country to be pets. But what happens is they raise them to be about 9 inches or so, and then they go off as pets. Usually, though, they don't eat. They eat at the farm, they get shipped off, and they don't eat until you purchase it. Now, if a snake goes for a long enough period without eating, many times they won't start up eating again just because you brought them home. Snakes don't eat. Generally, I have found that snakes don't eat when they're moved. Even if we move them from one building to the other, I have to give them at least a good 2 weeks before they even consider eating. So if you think about a snake being transported to a pet store and then you purchase it, you're purchasing it within 2 weeks usually. So that snake could have gone for a month at that point without eating, and then maybe it just goes away. They just don't eat and they don't survive. So that's why their lifespan as a pet just isn't very long. But they can live 20 years. And we've had one here that lived 18 years. So we've had them for a pretty long time, some of them. Now, the corn snake's really popular snake. There are over 800 color morphs, and that's just color varieties in this snake. They can be everything from purple, a really rich, they call them lavenders, really rich purple. They have sunsets, which are this beautiful, it looks like a sunset. They have them almost pure red. They have them with black lines. They have them almost pure white with just a little orange. So many color morphs out there, which give you a real variety in the snake colors that you can get. But again, you need to consider the snake lives 20 years. If you're buying it for a 10-year-old, they're going to be off to college in 8 years, and you've got it the rest of this snake's life. Now, snakes are much easier to take care of than turtles. You don't have the whole water factor. They only need to eat once a week. They do need very warm temperatures. You need to keep that tank super warm. They need to have water, and keeping a tank warm tends to dry out the water pretty quickly. Now, they do bite. The turtles can bite as well. Usually, though, it's the scratching of the turtles. They do bite, but it's nothing more than maybe a cat scratch, or I liken it. It's almost like being stung by a bee when they bite you. It's startling, but it doesn't really hurt. What can happen, though, when they bite, their teeth are very fine and clear and thin, and it's almost like getting an invisible sliver. So the tooth will break off. It'll be in there. You don't know that it's there, and it could get a little infected and get some swelling around it. Then you realize that you've still got a tooth in you and you need to take it out. This is much more of the common color of corn snakes. The corn snake, it's in the rat snake family, so if you've seen my program and go to meigspointnaturecenter.org's virtual learning center, see the program I did on the eastern rat snake, a lot of the information is the same because they're in the same family. So this is also known as the red rat snake or the southern rat snake. Again, lots of different common names. But most commonly corn snake, and it's because their color pattern, their natural color is the color of Indian corn, and you've seen that very colorful corn. So that's how they get their name. Again, they live much longer than a pet store will tell you generally, and they get a bit bigger. They can get 5 feet long. So you want to take that into consideration as well. A snake this size easily fits in a 20-gallon tank. But a 5-foot snake, you're going to need to get a 45 or 55-gallon tank for it. So that's taking up a lot more space. You need more heat. In a snake enclosure, and I just realized I should probably do an entire program on what it takes to keep an animal as a pet or keep it here at the Nature Center. But you need to have heating zones within the tank so the animal can move depending on the temperature. So these are all things that you need to consider when you're thinking about pet snakes. All right. Let's put this one back and we'll move on. Notice we keep the snakes in pillowcases only for these programs. It's a lot easier than me running over to its tank. All of these snakes are kept in our old building. Snakes and all the animals that you see today. Again, the old building is for non-natives, surplus animals that are loaned out to other nature centers for the summer, and feeder animals that are just being raised for food for the other animals, which unfortunately is a fact of life. So let's talk about that with the next snake. What do you feed snakes? This is something that makes people squeamish, and you've got to consider that when you're purchasing a snake as a pet. So this is Scarlet king snake. Beautiful. King snakes are absolutely gorgeous. One of my favorite group of snakes. The whole family are just beautiful. And here in Connecticut we have the milk snake, which is a beautiful member of the king snake family. Now, one of the things about king snakes in general, they have very small heads for the thickness of the body. Okay? So food size is very important when you're considering trying to feed it. Look at it, it's almost the same color as my sweater here. Very cool. King snakes come in lots of different colors, just like the corn snakes do. There are color morphs of these. There's not 800, but they do come in lots of different colors. Now, a snake can swallow something 3 times the size of its mouth or its head. So very small head here, meaning it's going to be able to eat a small to medium-sized mouse. This snake is not eating a full-size mouse because of the size of its head. But that's what snakes eat. Snakes, now you can train them, and captive snakes generally will eat frozen thawed mice. But many people have a problem taking a mouse out of a freezer, thawing it out, and then feeding it to a snake. It can be a bit squeamish. So they will also sometimes, though, eat live mice. Some of the snakes you have a really hard time getting them to eat frozen thawed, and you have to feed them live, and that can cause people some issues as well. Turtles, I think for the most part, people don't mind feeding a turtle a live fish, but feeding a snake, a cute little mouse, becomes an issue. Do king snakes like to be handled? So I will say the best snake for handling is going to be your corn snake. They are very, in general, a very laid-back snake. They don't bite very often. King snakes tend to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more nippy. They will bite a little bit more often. This snake is a little bit flinchy sometimes, and my staff and volunteers are a bit nervous sometimes handling it. I have found this snake to be perfectly calm. As far as king snakes, I've had much more aggressive king snakes, but you're talking in general. And just like groups of dogs tend to be considered aggressive and others are less, same thing in snakes. They do have general personalities, but there are exceptions to every rule. And this snake is just an absolutely beautiful snake. This is Sassafras. So, I think Sassafras came to us as, again, there was purchased for a child who was moving away and couldn't take the snake with them, so we ended up with Sassafras. So great question. So let's see, Kathy says their head is so cute. Let's see if I missed any comments here. I would like to see how you care for snakes. I'll explain a little bit more. I think I covered most of the care of snakes. Judith wants to know why people are so afraid of snakes. That is a good question and a legitimate question. Somebody said pass on snakes. Not for them. Oh, how smart are turtles? How smart is a turtle? Do they bond with their caregiver? Again, I'll say in general, snakes and turtles don't link up with people very often, but it can happen with turtles much more often than it happens with snakes. A turtle that is handled regularly by a person is going to be a lot more attached to that particular person, and are going to like being handled more often. So let's talk about that for a second. You say handling a turtle. It's really difficult to handle a turtle. What I mean by that, taking the turtle out to clean the tank, taking the turtle out to let it walk, taking it out to feed it, reaching in and just having your hand near the turtle. That's going to make the turtle much more friendly. It's going to approach you more readily when you come over to the tank. It's going to pay more attention to you. So those are all fine things for pet turtles. Snakes are the same way. You pick up a snake and you handle it. You don't have to, take it out to let it walk. You actually don't want to let it wander around your home because it's going to find a little tiny place to get into that you won't be able to get it out of. So a snake, when you take it out, you need to hold it, handle it, keep it in your hands. Just let it, go through your hands. This snake, she feels, actually I'm not sure if it's a male or female, it feels a little bit cool to the touch right now, so it's less active. I've had it out of its enclosure for a while. Again, reptiles need to be kept warm. Generally for these snakes, because they're all snakes and turtles that we've looked at, they're all southern species, so we tend to keep them about 80 degrees or warmer. And the warmer they are, the more readily they eat. So we actually, if they slow down their eating, we warm their tank up even more than 80. So something to keep in mind, if you've got it in your home, you're going to need to keep that enclosure much warmer than you would keep your home. Question about salmonella. Turtles can carry salmonella. That's actually years ago. They banned people from selling any turtle less than 4 inches, and that's because you could fit it in your mouth. I know. Why would you put a turtle in your mouth? Kids used to put turtles in their mouth and they would get salmonella, so that's an issue. So they made a size requirement on the turtle so you wouldn't put it in your mouth. You can still get salmonella on your hands, and then you eat it. Generally, captive turtles are much less likely to carry salmonella than a wild turtle. You can actually wash them. You can keep their tank nice and clean and reduce the possibility of them having salmonella. But yes, that is a consideration. A queen snake. Yeah, actually, I am not sure if this one is a male or female. King snakes, you can tell by their tails. But I have to have a male and female generally next to each other to be able to tell. But you do an internal probe, and we haven't done one with this snake to find out if it's a boy or a girl. So that's a good comment, though. Everybody, are all ladybugs girls? No. Are all king snakes boys? No. So, all right. Any questions, comments about snakes and or turtles before we move on to our last animal? All right. Now it gets active. He just shot up to the top. There it is right there. To the top of the pillowcase here. So the pillowcases are a great way to move snakes around. They stay a bit more calm. That way they can breathe right through it. Reduces their stress level a bit. We do go through a lot of pillowcases here at the Nature Center. And this is a good time to give a shout out to anybody that made a donation. Over the past couple of months, our friends put out a call for donations. We got lots of great donations. There are things on our list now that I need to take off the list because we got so many donations. So towels and blankets, we got more than we needed. We got plenty of pillowcases, crayons. I have so many crayons. All right, let's move on to the next one. Docile, probably female. That's good. All right, so this is, we're going to be looking at, let's see if I can get it. There we go. A skink. At least I think it's a skink. This came in, one of our former staff had it, and honestly, I don't remember what kind of lizard it was. I thought it was a spectacled gecko. It's not a spectacled gecko. I don't remember. Name is Doppler. It could be a western skink, blue-tailed skink maybe. It definitely looks like a skink. We do get skinks in Connecticut. We get the 5-line skink here in Connecticut. So skinks don't live very long, so you don't really have to worry about longevity when it comes to a lizard like this. They only live about 6 years. And we're going to talk about skinks, and we'll talk about lizards in general, because I'm not actually sure of the specific species here. But something you could consider with these, lizards tend to be a little more high-stressed. They get freaked out and will move very quickly. If you grab them or pick them up by the tail and freak them out too much, they will drop their tails. That's their defense. If a predator grabs onto their tail, they can just eject the tail. So you want to be careful. You don't want your lizard to be missing a tail. It can grow back, but it's a long process. It actually looks like there's a little bit of a scar right there. So it looks like at one point this lizard did drop its tail, and then it grew it back, or that's just an injury that has healed up. But that's not a natural location for a lump on this little skink. Now, my staff they're really nervous about this lizard because it's really quick. It scurries around quite a bit, and we would hate to have it get out. So that's something to consider. You can't really just hold it in your hand and let it chill out. If you got a larger one, like a bearded dragon, we've had lots of bearded dragons over the years, or an iguana, the green iguanas, they tend to just chill out on you more often. They like your warmth, so they'll sit on your lap. But you do have to be careful because they can be aggressive. They will bite. They have pretty heavy teeth. Their food, they're a little bit more particular about food as well. This one really likes wood lice. Some of them will only eat mealyworms. So you really got to think about diet for these see, I keep going back to turtles. These lizards, I don't do very many lizard programs. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of lizards come through the center. I would really love to have a 5-line skink, but again, they're endangered in Connecticut, so it's much more difficult to get. It wants to go to Florida. It probably would like Florida much better. In Florida, you can just go out and pick them up and you can get your pet that way. I don't suggest that as a way to get a pet, though. But they are absolutely beautiful. Now, again, with all the reptiles, they need to be kept very warm, 80+ degrees for this lizard. And again, if it stops eating, you have to increase the temperature. So again, keeping lizards, all the reptiles warm, it can be challenging. If you want your house temperature to drop down, you know, 57, or I forget what I keep mine at, 57 at night, that's not going to be very conducive for this reptile. You're going to have to really put a lot of heat on the enclosure to keep it warm. It's a beautiful lizard. Isn't that a beautiful animal? And it's so calm. It's just chilling out here. It really probably wants to know why I'm holding it. This hasn't been able to be used for a program. This is just, recent for me to use it. Actually, this is the first time I've used this lizard in a program. I'll show you the stripes on the back. Skinks come in lots of different shapes and sizes. Lizards do in general. It's really cool. Chameleons. That's one. Everybody loves the chameleons because they can change color. They're a very cool reptile to have. Again, the bearded dragons, very popular. The iguanas. But you need to consider, now those bigger lizards are going to live quite a bit longer. You've only got a few years. And a knoll is the most common one. You see them everywhere. I've seen them at fairs where you can just buy an anolis lizard. To me, it's a cruel thing to do because they're probably not living more than a day or two in somebody's house because they pick them up at a fair, bring them home, and don't keep them warm or don't know what to feed them. So really, you have to do your research. Some of the lizards eat a lot of vegetables, like the iguanas, and some of them don't eat vegetables at all. The anoles really like crickets. So things that you need to consider when you're choosing your pet. All right, so let's go over the basics. Choosing, this goes for any pet, from a fish to a bird and everything in between. How long do they live? What do they eat? What are their care requirements for their enclosures? Temperature, water, cleanliness, moisture. So some of these, like if you're keeping a pet frog, we didn't talk about this at all. They need to have a very moist enclosure. Reptiles need a little bit of moisture, like even the land ones. Land turtles or land lizards and snakes need a little bit of moisture, but not a lot. Too much is bad, too little is bad. You have to find that balance. That balance is hard to keep with temperature. If it's an animal that likes really moist but likes it very hot, the moisture evaporates away very quickly. So that needs to be kept in mind. I said how long they live. I guess those are the basics. But please do your research. I am not telling you not to pick one of these as a pet. I'm telling you to do research and find out about it. Another thing you want to research is where you're purchasing your pet from, or where you're getting your pet from. I would love it if you wanted one of these animals and you did your research, if you were able to find it through an adoption group where somebody is giving up a reptile or another animal that couldn't be cared for any longer. So reach out to your local organizations. There are parrot rescues here in Connecticut and Rhode Island, and reptile rescues. Choose your pets through those organizations first. Give a pet a second chance before you go and purchase a pet from a pet store. All right, let's see if I've got any questions here at the end. Weather in Florida. Let's see. Oh, so beware of falling iguanas in Florida because it's so cold. There we go. Now, I'm going to say the reason for that is when the temperature drops, reptiles become inert, immobile, whatever the cool word might be. They go into a torpor. Again, they do not hibernate. Torpor is forced on an animal by the weather conditions, and they will just drop out of the trees. And that does happen. So it's sort of a joke, but it's not really. It's the reality when the temperature in Florida drops too quickly. All right, let me just look through, see if there's any other questions. Blue-tailed lizards in North Carolina. Yeah, you go down south and everybody's got lizards. Here in Connecticut, we don't get a lot. All right, again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Remember, you can see all of our past programs on our YouTube channel, the Meigs Point Nature Center YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that. When I get 1,000 subscribers, I'll be able to do Facebook Live programs. Look for future programs interviewing DEEP staff people and me going out and visiting other parks as I've done in the past. Please visit the meigspointnaturecenter.org calendar for our Saturday lecture series and these programs that are recorded and stored in the Virtual Learning Center with additional educational content. And shout out to all the volunteers that have helped out by putting up that content and finding and creating that content. So until tomorrow, this is Ranger Russ signing off from the Meigs Point Nature Center.